An Oklahoma lawmaker argues the thousands of bills filed in advance of each legislative session is a problem, and he's introduced legislation to address it. A bill by State Representative Randy Graw would make a profound change in the way the state legislature conducts its business.
While crafting a budget for state government is the primary responsibility of the legislature, each session usually features a crush of new bills addressing social issues ranging from abortion to same-sex marriage and gun rights, and such things as educational standards, and even selecting the state vegetable, which happens to be the watermelon. State Representative Randy Graw has filed House Joint Resolution 1001, which would ask voters to approve a constitutional amendment requiring the legislature to draw up a budget every year, but deal with policy issues only in even-numbered years. Graw says the idea isn't new.
If you look across the 50 states, there are about 25 or 50% that have different structures to their legislative sessions. I mean, if we just look south of the border to Texas, they only meet every other year.
The idea of budget-only sessions is gaining traction among state leaders, including Governor Mary Fallin.
And I've even proposed that we do the budget every single year and legislative issues every other year, so they can get a better handle on how money is spent in the state, because it's complicated.
State Treasurer Ken Miller also supports it.
Personally, I think we could do with less policy than we get every year. So every other year for policy, for me, would actually be a relief. But having extra focus on the budget, I think, would be very beneficial.
Graw agrees, arguing additional time to focus on the budget without the distractions of policy issues would give the legislature more time for thoughtful consideration of how state resources are being spent.
Most members don't see the total budget until about the last 2 weeks of session. And so as you can imagine, there's a lot to do during those 2 weeks, and there's just not much time to really review, analyze, discuss, and debate the overall budget.
The budget is typically presented to lawmakers toward the end of the legislative session after months of negotiation involving the governor's office and members of the House and Senate Appropriations Committees. Graw says under his proposal, budget details will still be hammered out behind closed doors.
But the thing is, there's going to be a lot more time for the members to talk to their constituents about what their concerns are, how they want their money spent, and then to advise and discuss and pass that along to our representatives who will be in that room, making sure that we negotiate the best budget possible.
Limiting policy issues to every other year could lead to some lawmakers doubling up on bills during those years, but Graw doesn't see that as an issue.
On the House side, we can only introduce 8 pieces of legislation every year. We go ahead and try and limit the amount of new law that's coming in. So certainly, I imagine that you could have senators trying to double up on the number of legislation, but again, we only have so much time.
The bill does include an emergency exemption that would allow the legislature to take up policy issues in odd-numbered years, but only if approved by 3/4 of the legislature. As to whether the bill would encourage political posturing during election years?
If anything, I think we'll get better legislation because it is an election year. And we know that the voters are paying attention, and we know that there are other people that are looking to run against the House and Senate members. And so I think it will actually be beneficial, make sure that we really prioritize.
Graw expects the bill to be considered in committee during the first month of the legislative session. If approved by both houses of the legislature and signed by the governor, the measure would go to a vote of the people in November of 2016.